1 second. There we go. All right. So I want to introduce you all to our wonderful panelists. We have 5 panelists here for you today. And I would love to have each of them, at least before we get into our questions, just briefly introduce themselves, where they work, and what they have. So maybe we could start with MaryAnne.
Hi, everyone. I'm Onianwah. I'm a cybersecurity engineer at Humana. I studied information science at UMD.
Great, thanks, MaryAnne. And let's go maybe actually, let's just go in the order of what's on the slide here. Let's go with.
Hey, how's it going, everybody? My name's Tayo. I'm an application security analyst at Glassdoor. And I was class of 20, I can't even remember, a couple years ago.
I'm Kimberly Juliano. I'm currently a threat hunter and forensic analyst at ECS, which is a government contracting agency. And I graduated from Maryland in 2023, this past May, with a bachelor's in computer science.
Hey guys, I'm Russell Brown. I was also UMD alumni, so I graduated 2017 with a math degree. I'm currently working in kind of like a general data practitioner role, so kind of a mix of data science, data analytics, and data engineering.
Hi, everyone. I'm Julie Steinke. I am from the MITRE Corporation. I'm glad to be here today. It looks like I'm the only non-Maryland alumni, but I'll do my best to represent the rest of the schools out there. I am by training an industrial and organizational psychologist, and so that's a little bit different of a background. But I also work in a cybersecurity we call them Innovation Lab or Innovation Center. And I am part of the management team of a Cyber New Professionals program that we have at MITRE.
Perfect. Well, thank you all. Taking off the screen share so we can focus on our panelists here. So yeah, we can hop right into the questions that we have. First question for all of you is, can you please describe a little bit more about what you studied during your time in college and any activities that you participated in as a student? Maybe we can go the other way around this time. So maybe start with Julie.
Okay, I will start. I'll give my sort of career trajectory since I don't have the traditional path to getting here. I didn't study cybersecurity. I studied psychology as an undergrad, and then I actually went on to grad school and got a degree in kinesiology and sports psychology. And so I worked with college athletes for about 10 years as a sports psychologist. From there, I went back to school and started working on my doctorate in industrial and organizational psychology, and always pretty much studied the same stuff, where I study people who work under pressure and teams and how the teams work together when things go wrong. And that eventually led me, after working on my dissertation, led me to a postdoc that I worked on with George Mason University over in Virginia. And that was sponsored by Department of Homeland Security, and it focused on cybersecurity teams and CSIRTs. And so I took that team training and applied it to cybersecurity teams. And I really enjoyed that because it essentially made everything in my field new. So people have been studying teams and athletes and, the military and everything in my field for almost 100 years, but cybersecurity is this new way of looking at it. And so you didn't really know if things worked the same or worked different. And so that was the interesting challenge that brought me over.
Great, thanks so much, Julie. Russell, does it look like you're ready to go?
Yeah, so I guess my path was kind of varied as well. I guess I didn't know I wanted to go into cybersecurity. I'm actually like 6 months into cybersecurity, so it wasn't even really like a conscious decision to make that switch, but I did know that I wanted to work with data. At least an undergraduate, like there are like a few phases where I wasn't sure what I was trying to do, and kind of had different ideas about what I wanted to go for. At a certain point, like I actually just wanted to be a poker player. So when Maryland Live opened up their poker room in like 2014, I stopped going to class and just played for like 2 years. But it was like the advances in poker bots that really sparked my interest in AI and deep learning. And so I went back to UMD, finished my degree, and it's been about 5 years now.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you, Russell. I think our first two panelists too are good examples. There's not a traditional pathway always to these. Yeah, Kimberly, feel free.
Yeah, so like I said, I graduated Maryland in 2023, so this past May. I got my bachelor's in computer science, and I didn't do any of the paths. I just got a general computer science degree, and I did an upper level concentration in criminal justice. So I kind of knew that I wanted to be in the I don't know, like cybersecurity law enforcement space, but I wasn't really sure where. I did 2 internships in college. I did one at a bank just doing general information security. And then I did another one with the Department of Energy through the Federal Fellows Program. So that was more of a policy base just to kind of see if federal work was where I wanted to be. And I was working with the National Nuclear Security Agency. So super interesting stuff. I also highly recommend the Federal Fellows Program if you have an interest in working with the federal government, even if you're not necessarily, if you want to be more technical, it still works. It worked for me. So after that, I graduated college and I went home for the summer. And I basically spent the entire summer searching for jobs. And something that was hard for me to grasp was not having a job right out of college, because I know that when you major in computer science, that's what you're told is, oh, you'll be fine. You won't have any problem finding a job. I did not find a job right away, and that's fine. I ended up getting an internship that started in September with the House of Representatives doing general cybersecurity. It was an amazing experience, and I had a ton of experiences with different kinds of cybersecurity, and that was kind of what solidified me. And okay, I want to work in forensics. I want to be technical. And so through that, I then was able to stay on with the House of Representatives through a different contractor for a few months, just till I kind of figured out what I was going to do, which I was so grateful for. And after that, through my connections that I made at the House, I was able to get a junior threat hunting and forensic analysis position, which is where I am now. And yeah, so I just started that a few weeks ago, but it's definitely been a journey and not anything that I was expecting right out of college, but it definitely, I ended up where I wanted to be. So.
Hi, please feel free.
So my path was kind of straightforward, honestly. I graduated UMD in 2022 and with a bachelor's in information science, and I kind of followed the cybersecurity and privacy track. And I had a couple internships throughout my time. I had one with Amtrak doing cybersecurity, one with Textron Systems doing cybersecurity as well. And during that internship, I spent a month studying all day when I wasn't working on my projects anyways, studying all day for my Security Plus. So I got that as well. And by the time that internship was over, I had received an offer to come back. And I kind of always knew I was going to be in tech.
So same with me, I followed the traditional path. I also majored in information science. I just graduated this past December, and I had 2 minors. One was in nonprofit leadership and social innovation, and the second one was in science, technology, ethics, and policy. So I kind of knew I wanted to work with, data, cybersecurity, but also had an interest in more the policy side of cybersecurity. And so that's kind of what I do right now at Humana. So I'm in charge of, making sure that within Humana that the various subsidiaries are following national and Humana cybersecurity policies.
Perfect. Thank you all so much. Great. And also I'm seeing a question in the chat. If you have questions, please feel free to put them in the Q&A section of Zoom. We'll make sure to get to questions at the end of the prepared questions. So next question for you all is, we've heard a little bit about your time in college and what you studied. So for you, how and when did you decide to pursue cybersecurity? Please
I
feel
can,
free.
yeah, I can hop in. It's kind of a funny story. So when I was thinking about applying for colleges, I was not sure what I wanted to major in, and I was in it was an AP adjacent like IB course in computer science, and I really enjoyed coding. But the thing that really pushed me towards cybersecurity was that I was actually binging Criminal Minds at the time. And I really loved Penelope Garcia, who was the main tech analyst. And I literally looked up what she did, like what it was called. And I looked up how to become that. And I was like, oh, that's perfect. I like to code. And so I ended up pursuing that and sticking with cybersecurity. And I mean, I'm very lucky that I actually ended up liking it, but I kind of always knew that I was going to be in tech in general, but that was kind of my pathway. And then when I got to college, I was applying for cybersecurity focused internships that really solidified my interest as well.
For me, like I mentioned earlier, I was always interested in tech. My dad, he grew up in Nigeria and he didn't touch a computer till he was 25, is the story he always likes to tell. And ever since then, like tech was his life. He started a bunch of companies. And when I was born, I was always around it. I got my first computer when I was 4 or 5, and I would spend all the time on it, just always interested in any aspect of tech. And as I got older, I thought I wanted to do software development, coding things, but I found cybersecurity sometime in high school, and I just found that to be a little bit more appealing. I thought that it would be really cool to always have everything in the world, like everything in the world is now related to tech in some way, and cybersecurity is a huge part of obviously staying safe online and keeping companies and people safe. And I always thought that was super cool.
For me, actually with Tayo. My dad also grew up in Nigeria. So my dad was so familiar with like he studied like Fortran and Perl. And so he started a business here. So he didn't have anyone to help him. So he set up his entire like network by himself when he was starting up. So I watched him like, get all that technology. But when it came to like choosing my major, thinking about those experiences and like watching my dad set up those things, I was more interested in like, the why, like why does this technology work? Why are people like so obsessed with it? And that's why I chose information science over computer science in the end, because I was debating both. But ultimately I was kind of more interested in like the people aspect of it and how like cybersecurity like impacts people. And so that's how kind of I ended up at Humana, just like in a healthcare company. It's like, how does health and cybersecurity, like, how are those both like important to people?
I answered it a little bit earlier, but I can elaborate. I started off college not as a psychology major, as a math major. And so I did some coding classes and stuff like that. But then I decided to switch to psychology because I wanted a little bit more of that people aspect. I kept the math minor essentially because I knew I was going to end up doing research in some way. So I thought it would be useful. And so I kind of did that. And then, like I said, I had this whole other career. But then when I ended up, kind of being exposed to what cybersecurity was, it did, it was all the stuff that I had originally found interesting in other areas that I was now able to carry over to cyber and see the kind of the interplay between those. So the people side, the technical side, it kind of brought all of that together, which made it very interesting to me. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I think I kind of covered it in the last question a bit too, but I think more broadly speaking, I knew I wanted to go into data after like after like a year or two on the job, and it's fun. There's a lot of stuff going on. When it comes to tech, there's so many innovations just constantly and new tools, and it's really incredible like how much one person can do now with the tools that are available that would have been unthinkable just a few years ago.
Perfect. Thank you all. Right. There's such varied pathways, right, to get to to any job, but right, especially jobs in cyber. And so at the naming jobs in cyber, I would love to actually hear a little bit more about your current jobs, right? So could you please tell us all about your current role, what you do in your role, and what even a typical day looks like for you?
I can start. So I'm a cybersecurity engineer at Humana. And so within that role, Humana has a couple of subsidiaries, and one of them is called One Home Health, and they do home healthcare for like people who just live at home. And so since they were a recent acquisition, part of my job is making sure that the One Home is slowly like builds up to Humana's current cybersecurity standards. So day to day, I'm looking at different projects that different things that One Home has to do to finally be up to a proper acquisition at Humana. So right now, the two things that I'm doing are secure code training, which is for developers to learn how to make sure that their code is like, properly scanned, make sure it's secure, there's no vulnerabilities. And the other thing that I'm doing right now is also an application security project, which is the whole thing, which is basically just making sure that One Home, part of that secure code thing is making sure their code is scanned. They're scanning code every month, and they have like proper process diagrams in place in case something goes wrong. But there's a ton of other things that I do, but that's the gist of it.
For me, so like I said, I'm an application security analyst at Glassdoor, and I manage our public bug bounty program, which is hosted on HackerOne. So people from around the world can kind of look at our assets, like our web apps in this case, or our mobile apps, and try and find vulnerabilities, and they'll submit them to us, and we'll pay them a bounty based on the severity of it. So I manage that day to day. Most of my day is spent talking to researchers from around the world, interacting with developers to remediate those vulnerabilities. And then on top of that, I also have like my security projects that are for our security like team. So I have OKRs every quarter that I have to work on, which are just quarterly objectives we're trying to complete. So a lot of those are related to like creating security documentation or training others. For example, I just led an application security development training session for our developers, so they learned about the most common vulnerabilities we've been facing recently, like cross-site scripting and other things like that, just to make them more aware and show them how to fix them. As well as another part of my job is investigating new tools, like POCing different companies to see what vendors might be helpful in our security environment to bolster our security posture, essentially.
So I think my day to day is pretty chill. So I'm more of just like a BI engineer. I think that's the best descriptor for my job, even though it's never been my official job title. But just in general, I'm always building data pipelines, dashboarding, talking to people, just figuring out what kind of stuff they're working on. If there any data, like information we can give you that's going to help you out, and then going out, try to find that data, turn it into a pipeline that's going to run continuously. And yeah, I mean, other than that, like everything I do is kind of in that theme, and I spend time reading docs. I spend time looking at new tools. Just trying to keep learning in general and find any way to, provide anything useful out of the mountains of data that we have.
I'll go ahead and talk next. So first of all, if people aren't familiar with MITRE, I can explain what my company is if you've never heard of us. We are a company that runs at what's called an FFRDC, which is a federally funded research and development center. It's essentially a trusted organization, trusted partnership with the government to do hard, complex problems that the government has. So things that you can't necessarily go out and find the answer with from an industry partner or some sort of vendor. So the solution the government is looking for doesn't necessarily exist. So they come to us to kind of help build that gap, bridge that gap a little bit. So our tagline is we're a nonprofit institution that's basically committed to the public interest. So we do stuff that is for the public good. We don't make money. We don't have products that we sell or anything like that. So anything we do is just given to the government, and essentially some of it's put out there for the public domain to just help the nation become more safe and secure in whatever they do. And so we've got these different FFRDCs that we run. I believe there's 6 of them. They touch on different areas. One of those areas happens to be cybersecurity. So there's many other areas that our company is involved in. Cybersecurity, essentially, aside from being its own FFRDC within the company, is also an area that the other FFRDCs are focused on, right? So we have stuff that we do with, healthcare and, with the IRS or the FAA or something like that. But there's cyber that kind of is a thread between all of these. So my company's pretty fun, where you can kind of choose your own adventure in a way, where you can have a very specific organization that you want to work with within a government. We call them sponsors. So you can work with, Department of Homeland Security or the FAA or whatever it is that's out there, if you have that specific interest, or you can work in what's called an innovation lab, which is where I'm hosted, where it essentially means, a good analogy I've heard is we're kind of like library books. So everybody checks us out as a resource, uses us for whatever project they need, and then sends us back. So that means that I can work with essentially any particular sponsor or agency in any particular area. So my day-to-day really changes depending on what it is I'm doing. It's very project-based. So the projects that I'm working on, I may do a consult on a project that lasts for an hour or a week or whatever. I may be on a project for a year, maybe multiple years, depending on the project. It's just very different. And so most of the work that I do, I would say, for my own expertise, centers on cyber workforce development. How do you develop the workforce? How do you get the right people into the right job, make sure they're doing the right thing, improving their performance, handling those situations under stress, collaborating together, all that stuff that I was talking about a little bit earlier. But I also, as I said, I'm what's called a group lead in the Cyber New Professional Program, which is a supervisory role. And so we have this Cyber New Professional Program that's geared towards people who have finished a cyber degree within the past 2 years. So we hire people within that 2-year time frame. And essentially the program exists to bridge that gap between school and then the complex problems that we're focusing on at MITRE, so that instead of coming into a specific job where you're doing a specific thing and you have a specific role, we put people through rotations throughout different capability areas. So you might come in and say, I have skills in red teaming or policy or whatever it is, but we can move you around to different jobs so you get those experiences in other areas. And then after about, it's roughly a 2-year program, after those 2 years, then you pick kind of what that little niche is that you've created, and you then go into a more permanent department. So it is kind of this rotational experience. So I am one of the leaders of that program who helps make sure that when we bring people in who have just graduated from college, that they get those experiences and development and training and whatever it is to make sure that they grow in their career. So that's a fun part of my job.
I'll just hop in at the end here. So I'm kind of in a weird clearance limbo right now with my day-to-day, but I can talk about threat hunting as a general career path. So basically threat hunting is, there's a few kinds of hunts that you can do. There's incident-based hunts, and then there's hypothesis-based hunts. And so, for example, an incident-based hunt would be, there was an intrusion, and then this is also where the forensic analyst part of my career comes in as well. So if there's an intrusion, we go and we take whatever physical device, whether it's a hard drive or something like that, we image it. So we don't actually just go into their computer. We'll image the device and we'll take all their logs, things like that. And then we actually use the MITRE attack framework to kind of go through their logs and see how the intruder got in and those kinds of things, just to make sure that we're not staying vulnerable to whatever attack was given on us. And then we also work through threat intelligence tickets. So if we hear from another government agency or just from the general cyberspace that there's a threat or a threat actor that's actively working on something, we'll check our own logs to make sure that we're not vulnerable to that attack. So yeah, that's kind of a general day-to-day kinds of things that we can work on. But I'm also studying for my GCIH certification, which is a certified incident handler. So if you have any interest in working in a security operations center or in threat hunting, that's something that I recommend looking into as well. I'm still working on that, but it's definitely helpful, the information that teaches you.
Great, thank you all. And actually, Kimberly, that's a perfect transition to our next question, focusing on certification. So what are some of the key ways that you all know and maybe that you've done yourselves that students can think about as they are preparing for a future career in cybersecurity? What I know Kimberly, right, mentioned certifications. What skills, what knowledge areas are really important for students to focus on building?
I think for me, there's like three main things that I focus on. So one is realizing there's following your passions. There's a lot of different lanes in cybersecurity. You can go to privacy, application security, pen testing, cloud SecOps, information assurance. There's so many different realms of cybersecurity. So finding which one you have the most interest in, most curiosity in, is going to be really helpful in narrowing down your path a little bit. But it's always good to try out different things just because. But also keeping up to date. If you really like tech, you're probably seeing stuff on Twitter, on YouTube, in the news. You're probably looking out for those articles anyways. So keep up to date with cybersecurity happenings in the world, because they do matter, even if they don't directly affect you or your company or wherever you're at in life right now. They do matter, and it's good to stay up to date. And then also continuing your personal education with certifications. Like I mentioned, I have my Security Plus, and there are a bunch of different certifications that might be more applicable to whatever path or job you're trying to get. Maybe they'll ask for a Linux Plus, maybe they'll ask for whatever. And just keep following your curiosities. Do some at-home labs, watch YouTube videos about cybersecurity. There's so many different things to practice and get exposure to. So as long as you do those things, I feel like you're very well set to get into cyber.
I basically had the same answer. I think, or the information studies degree, I assume most of you guys are in the information study school, is the best first step. But just after that, you got to stay generally interested. There's so much going on. There's so many different subdomains. You're definitely going to find things that interest you, and spend time just go on YouTube and Twitter and see what people are doing, see what things pique your interest, and just keep doing that, and it'll work out.
I can also just add on to, the whole certification talk and that kind of thing, is that I was not unaware, but when I was in college, I didn't think that getting a certification before I graduated was something that was really necessary. And so that did kind of take down the amount of jobs that I could apply to, because some of them did require a Security Plus. So Security Plus, I feel like, and people can disagree with me, jump in, go ahead. But I think that Security Plus is a pretty good general one, and a lot of entry-level positions require you to have a Security Plus. So that definitely opens your job pool and just adds something else to your resume. But I will say, don't go crazy with certifications because they are expensive. And there are a lot of places that will say, for example, the job that I'm working on now, they said, okay, we see that you have a few gaps in your education. We think a GCIH would really help you. We want to take you on and we will pay for your certification. So if people see your potential, they will offer to. There's a lot of places with educational assistance, things like that, that will pay for the certification for you. So if you can't afford a certification, that does not mean that you won't get a job. I didn't have a certification and now somebody's paying for me to get one. So although certifications are definitely important, as long as you have those foundational skills, you can get into the room and then they will help you get that certification or at least fill those educational gaps for you.
I think the two cybersecurity tracks at UMD, the one offered in CS and then the one offered in information science, I think are really valuable. I can't speak too much on CS, obviously, but my experience in the cybersecurity track for InfoSci, I think it was really valuable because there was a bit of a tech focus, but there's more of a policy focus, which I think is often forgotten in discussion cybersecurity. I really liked all the cybersecurity classes I took because really made me think about the different ways that technology are used and like just made me think about, how like people are using data, people are so obsessed with like technology, but like, what are the different exploits for especially for marginalized communities, like what are different exploits that companies can use, other people can use to take advantage of people. So I think, and I'm sure the CS cybersecurity track is very similar, very probably more technical, of course. But I think maybe if you're in either of those two degrees, maybe taking a class or just focusing your entire track, focus on taking a track, taking those tracks, I think are like super essential.
So I could talk a little bit about what we look for when we hire. I definitely the curiosity piece, right? So we have people, we toss complex problems at people, and we need people who have a basic level of skill so they can come in and do something. What that something is pretty wide open. And then, like I said, we expose them to other areas of cyber. So I wouldn't assume that you know all about cyber yet, so even if you know these particular fields and you have interest in them, there's areas where those fields are going to relate that you don't quite know yet, because I think cyber in the real world is very different than cyber in the academic world. And there's a gap to be bridged a little bit there. So that curiosity and essentially learning how to learn is going to be something that takes you far, because you have to sort of see where cyber applies elsewhere, right? So even me being a psychology, how do I bridge the gap between those two? Because I mean, one of my first meetings at MITRE, I went to a government agency, and the guy who was in charge was basically like, why is there a psychologist in my room? Why am I paying for a psychologist right now? And so I had to explain, and make them see the value of my field to cyber. And I think it also goes the other way, where you can take cyber and apply it to any particular field and learn to promote that. So you could create it if you have two interests, like I had sports and cyber, you can put those together. You can kind of make your own journey, like I said. We don't particularly look for certifications. So just going to the workforce piece, at MITRE, we don't look for certifications. Some people do. It just kind of depends. I know there's a push in certain areas of cyber to focus maybe less on four-year degrees, more on certifications. It kind of just depends on the agency or the organization you're looking to work in. I think there's also unique areas of cyber where you can have a certification or a degree in the technical stuff that shows you know how to do something, but there's also sort of these other skills that are needed, right? There's leadership skills that are needed. So if we can see demonstration of leadership skills, communication skills, good collaboration skills, problem solving, being able to just promote that you can stand up in a room and talk to people and engage and bridge that technical language versus normal everyday language for people who aren't technical, and help build the gap that way. That goes a long way. We've got people who, critical infrastructure cybersecurity is a very important factor out there, right? And so we need people who know cyber, but we also need people who know things like HVAC systems. And again, putting those two areas together where the training path is not necessarily out there for what that need is right now. So there's a lot of openness there. I think just being curious about what your interests are, what your skills are, and just finding those problems yourselves. Those are good things that we look for in employees. Obviously, they have to come in with, like I said, a certain set of skills so that we can put them on projects and be able to do something. So as long as you come in with skills to do something, we can expose you to other areas of cyber and build those skills at the same time, because again, there's these complex problems are always changing. So it's a little bit hard to predict. So you kind of get to choose your own adventure, I think is a good term for cyber, right? So, it's hard to say you're going to do something. So I think just learning how to learn and learning how to think about a problem, that's going to go a long way.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you all. So I know we have about 20 minutes left. I'm seeing some questions coming into the Q&A, so please keep those questions coming. I think I might ask one more question before we transition over to questions from attendees. So also as a reminder, if you see questions in the Q&A that you really like and that you would love to hear answered, please give those a thumbs up, just so that we know people are interested in those questions especially. Great, wonderful. So I think the last question I had for you all for right now, I know you're all in various stages of your career. Some of you are even, in your first role outside of graduation. So I'd be interested to hear where you all take this. But what would you all say, like if you had to think to yourself when you were in college, what kinds of tips do you think you give yourself, knowing what you know now, and maybe what are some of the things that you do know now that you wish you knew back then?
I've probably been out of college the longest, so maybe I should start. Because my field took a switch, right? So I would say whatever you have planned now, just be open to it changing, because you're going to surprise yourself, and the world's going to give you opportunities, and just be open to those opportunities. And like I said, if you know who you are and what you bring to a table, and you know what you're interested in and you're open to exploring those, that's going to take you far. So I never would have imagined I'd be where I am now. Even in college, I started off as a math major, thought I was going to do actuary science, turned into psychology, thought I was going to be a sports psychologist and do that forever. Then I thought I was going to be a professor. And then I went and, I had all these kind of paths, but my core interest have always kind of guided me throughout all of those. I've always kind of focused on the same things, just in a lot of different areas and a lot of different domains. And so be open to those opportunities. That's going to really help you, I think.
I would say for me, honestly, I was very hard on myself about grades and, how comparing myself to other students and other people's internships and that kind of thing. But it really is the only thing that matters is the path that you want to take. And that was something I didn't want to go into the big tech companies. And that was something that was, I was like, should I want to work for Google? What's the deal? But I'm really happy where I am. So it's like, don't compare yourself to other students. Don't compare your grades to other students, because it really just is like how your personal journey. I graduated with the same degree that everybody else did, no matter what grades I got. So, and I ended up in the position that I wanted. So, yeah, I would say just give yourself some grace and make sure that you're taking care of yourself and your grades.
Definitely take care of yourself in cyber. I see way too many people staying up all night, running on Red Bull. Take care of yourself. Take breaks, blink.
Yeah, I think that was really great advice. Very few people are going to ask to see your grades ever. So it's not such a big deal. If you're truly interested in the field, like you're going to keep learning and you're going to do just fine. I would say the advice that I wish I knew earlier, like I wish I knew in college that I wanted to go into this field, and I might have taken a more direct path towards it. I think that if you're thinking about getting a master's degree, or if you're super ambitious, a PhD, definitely worth it. And ideally, you'll be at a company that's going to help fund it. But even if you're not, like I would just go ahead and do it.
I would say for me, one of the biggest things that I personally use was, or that I wish I had known a little bit more about when I was younger, was focusing more on soft skills and not your technical skills. Julie kind of mentioned it early, like curiosity and leadership. There's so many things that in cyber is kind of hard to come by with some people. Like a lot of people are very, very technical and they know how to do everything on a certain software. They know how to breach any system, but a lot of people are lacking soft skills. Communication is one of the biggest ones. And for me, that's something that I wish I had learned earlier so I could have worked on them a little bit more. But now that I have those skills and, you know, I continue to practice them, it makes a huge difference. I didn't get in my position because I'm more technical than a lot of other people. I got in my position because of the other traits that I had along with those skills. So don't think it's all about, you know, spending all day on Hack the Box or some other, you know, secure code warrior or something. It's not about that. You should have some knowledge and experience and interest and technical abilities, but you're more than cyber, and that's what companies are going to look for.
Yeah, I would say also when you do your resumes, make sure that's evident, right? So we get a lot of people who want to put every tool they use and every cyber experience on their resumes, but they don't put anything else. And so they look very one-dimensional, like they are just cyber and that's it. And we want people who have, you know, other life skills that they bring to the table. So I would just add that out there as well.
I wanted to add one more piece of advice too. So yeah, like the soft skills, that's the most important thing. And everything's moving so fast. Like it kind of took me a while to internalize this, but everybody's learning like as everything goes along. People are learning, people who've been on the job for decades, right? Who already established, they're learning these new tools along with you and new methodologies. So you know, there shouldn't be any imposter syndrome or anything. If you're really interested in it, you know, it's a community for sure.
I'd add to that, networking is a good thing to do. So the more you get to know people, the more you get to talk to them. That's a good way to build those communication skills. But it's also, you know, kind of like Russell was just saying, you're not starting out new, you're not the least smart person in the room. You should, you know, I always assume I'm not the smartest person in the room. Somebody's got to know something, especially in cyber. You know, there's so many technical things that I don't know from that perspective. You know, networking and talking to people and bringing those perspectives together, that really is a helpful thing. So just get out there and talk to people, get to know them. Those might lead to job opportunities. That's how I ended up at MITRE. Someone from my postdoc knew MITRE, used to work at MITRE, and was like, hey, you should go there. And I was like, okay, let me look into it. You know, otherwise who knows what I'd be doing right now? Probably be a professor somewhere.
Perfect. Thank you so much, all. That was great. All those pieces of advice were fantastic, and also make me very happy because you all touched on many things that I talk about and that we talk about in the Career Center all the time. So it's great to hear it all from you. And since I mentioned the Career Center too, I just want to remind students that you have access to the Career Center. I provide support for students in the College of Information Studies, but we provide support to all students on campus, whether it's related to things like your resume, your cover letter, those application pieces, or you are just thinking very broadly about what do I want to do? And everything in between. So please keep in mind that you can come to us for support. So at this point, I think we can transition to answering a few of the questions that came in from the audience. Thank you all for submitting your questions. I'm seeing some upvotes, so there are definitely some top questions here that people want to hear the answers to. And we'll say for panelists, feel free to chime in as you feel like you have an answer or response. It's okay if you don't have something for every question, but please feel free to chime in as you see fit. So first question that I'm seeing is from Etmi. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing. The question is, what are some good personal projects related to cyber that we can do to put on our resume?
I think I have kind of an unrelated, or not unrelated, but more obscure personal project that you can work on. And it might be a little bit biased because of my job title, but bug bounty programs, like you can sign up for them on platforms for free. And there's a bunch of companies who make their assets available to you to test in return for money, which is one a great thing. But you get to work on actual cybersecurity skills if you're interested in like red teaming or blue teaming specifically. If you like the idea of fixing vulnerabilities or exploiting them, bug bounty programs are a great way to learn how to hack things. Also learn the remediations for them, because that's something you have to submit with your report, like a recommendation for remediation. And it also helps you learn how to write reports, which in cybersecurity, you're always writing documentation or you're always reading it. I think everybody here probably has that same experience. So I would say try your hand at like kind of exploiting systems for monetary gain and for also helping companies kind of keep up their security. So yeah, like HackerOne, BugCrowd, there's a bunch of platforms out there.
Now, I don't know if you saw Taya, but there was a response in the chat. What about blue teaming?
There's other ways you can learn about it. I think that's still like bug bounty hacking is kind of applicable to blue teaming as well, because you have to learn how to remediate those. When you're exploiting things, you kind of just figure out how to fix them too if you're learning about it properly. So for blue teamers, like if you're trying to be on that more defensive side, it's still very valuable to learn how red teamers are getting into systems. If you as a blue teamer want to catch them, you have to think like a red teamer. So that's what I would say.
I can also jump in and say, as I'm currently going through adding stuff to my resume and studying for the GCIH and learning the ropes of my new career as well, that Microsoft has a ton about like Azure. If you're interested in blue teaming, query languages are big, so learning like KQL, SQL, those kinds of things. Microsoft itself, like Windows, has great resources for that. They do exercises and just general like courses that you can earn like badges for. So if you need to prove yourself, you can. But I've been learning a lot through that as well.
I would say, aside from a specific topic, think about what it is you want that topic to promote about you, right? So for instance, some jobs will ask you to come in and do a presentation, and you might present something that you've done in class, or you might present something that you've done in, your home lab or whatever it is. But you want to think about how that is demonstrating the skills that you're looking for, that the employer is looking for. So knowledge of the area, that sort of other way of thinking. So if you're a blue teamer, demonstrate that you can look at it from the red perspective, vice versa, the adversarial mindset. Don't just think, or don't just show here's what a tool does step by step, but why does the tool do what it does? What's the critical thinking understanding that you have behind the tool that you need to know, so that really show you know what is happening, not just sort of the procedures in place. I think demonstrating those type of factors in whatever it is you're doing are going to go a long way, rather than saying, I know how to follow this procedure or check these boxes or, demonstrate these standards, whatever it is. Show more of that critical thinking perspective. That I think will make you stand out a little bit more. That's the stuff that we tend to look for when we look for presentations and so forth.
Perfect. Any other thoughts that anyone wants to add before moving on to the next question? Okay, perfect. All right, so the next question is from Jalen. Jalen asks, what advice do you have for students who are seeking internships? After getting rejected for many, what tips do you have to increase your chances of getting one?
It's a numbers game.
Yeah, I was gonna say like it takes a long time sometimes, especially right now in this job market. Like it's tough. But like I spent days every day, submitting 50 to 100 applications every single day to every position in the world that you could think of. And there's kind of two things for me to keep in mind. One, this is like a LinkedInism or something, but like reaching out to recruiters via private message instead of just applying and letting it go into the void, because sometimes they'll never even see your application. People are submitting hundreds of applications for one role. If you message a recruiter, you have such a higher chance of getting noticed. And then the other thing is, I lost it, but that's really my biggest thing, is like reaching out directly to recruiters. Like, you don't want to just submit an application and hope it comes through one day, because it likely won't, especially right now. You have to make those connections and build those relationships, and you'll be a lot more likely to secure something.
I think for internships as well, one thing to stand out and what kind of worked for me is like making a personal or sort of like personal connection to the company. Like for Humana because they were at the career fair a couple years ago. And so when I talked to them, I talked about my interest in like healthcare and like, like marginalized communities and like working in tech and kind of representing like the gap between like just like the effect of like healthcare and insurance and like marginalized communities, especially since Humana's focus is Medicare and Medicaid. And so like the recruiter, I still talk to her today and she always brings it up. Like she's like, you stuck out to me like from that moment. And I just think that making your personality shine, because one thing I was gonna say for the last question is that, well, I was gonna say I was really like insecure about my tech skills, but I was very confident in my soft skills. And like I've always known how to like talk to people and elevate myself. And so like really sharpening those skills and connecting it to whatever company you're interviewing at will definitely help you.
I was gonna say as well, which you're gonna love this. I utilized the Career Center over the summer when I was not receiving any feedback I wasn't even getting rejections. Like I was just getting straight up no response, which is so frustrating. And so I went to the Career Center and I was like, so many people have reviewed my resume. There's no way they're gonna have anything. And they actually had a bunch it was not even about the content. It was about the way that it was formatted, because a lot of companies are using the automatic formatters. So you could just be completely pushed to the side because you have a line right under your name. They don't see anything on there. They're looking for, something that I learned in the Federal Fellows Program as well as tailoring your resume. So if there's a skill that you have that isn't specifically mentioned on your resume, or there's a keyword that they use that you have on your resume, but you don't use that exact word, change the word, because they're going to see that their job description is showing on your resume. And that, will give you some more points, because I know that a lot of places are using those like automatic resume reviewers. So it is important to tailor your resume. And I also second everything about the soft skills that was said, because I got a lot of compliments at my internship this past few months, but the number one was not about my technical skill. It was not about, my smarts or whatever. It was about that I could talk to people and that I was good with people, and my soft skills were refined as well. So definitely don't discount that on your resume, adding leadership experiences, things like that.
I would add also, think about other ways you can demonstrate your skills. So have a GitHub account and put things up there where people can go and look at the work you've done and see code that you've developed and so forth. If you're doing, if you're in a situation where you need money, take an internship that pays and then volunteer somewhere to do the cyber stuff, or volunteer to do cyber stuff for your internship where they're paying you for something else. Just think about how you can find ways to demonstrate what you're doing. There's programs out there that might help you. There's a scholarship for service program. If you're not familiar with that, that's an issue, or that's a program where the government will essentially give you scholarship to pursue a degree in exchange for essentially however many years of scholarship they give you. You agree to work for the government for that amount of time. There's academic programs that do research or application type of work through like centers. NSA has centers of excellence, and they have a program called Ensure. Maryland might be a part of it, I'm not sure. But that gives you a chance to do research, so you can based on some of that research, you can maybe do publications or something with some of your professors, anything that gives you something to put out there that gives someone an example of the type of work you do. And then on your resume, link to that, put your GitHub, put the publications you have, conferences you've attended, that kind of stuff. Those are going to be things that, aside from the internship experience, are ways that others get to see the type of work you do. So an internship will be nice because it gives people a chance to sort of test you, and you can test the area to make sure you like it, but you want to make sure that you can kind of demonstrate your stuff to the masses, right? So think of some other ways to put that work out there.
I don't know if I can help you guys land an internship. I just want to say, I swear these internships are way harder to land than an actual job. And the first job's the toughest, but once you get in, it gets way easier. So just don't be discouraged, and you know, once you get into the field, you'll see.
Thank you all so much. That was all wonderful insights. I know we are at 1 minute until 6, so I want to make sure to respect folks' time. I do want to see if anyone has thoughts about Bree's question, just very, very briefly. Like, feel free to just toss some short bits of information out here if you have any thoughts. But Bree is asking about what entry-level jobs you would recommend to pursue, while also trying to earn some certifications, maybe while you're in school or just after graduating. Like, maybe even thinking about what job titles to keep an eye out for entry level.
For me, even before I got internships, I was doing like IT support jobs. Like I did IT support for Collins Aerospace at BWI Airport. I did, I even worked at the at Terrapin Tech at UMD for a while. And then just some other miscellaneous like IT jobs, like just tech, like help desk, whatever. If you're struggling finding cyber jobs or whatever field you're trying to go in, if you can just get into help desk IT and that in a role like that, it becomes so much easier, and it will count as tech experience. Like just get your foot in the door. It might not be where you want to end up forever, but unfortunately, it's important that to show that you actually have experience. So as long as you try and get some role where you can say, hey, I was doing this, X, Y, and Z, I was using Active Directory, like that is a great way to start looking attractive when you're finally ready to start applying for actual cyber entry level positions.
I will say, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I was going to say help desk is really, I think, is a good recommendation, because depending on the company, help desk and cybersecurity engineers are often interacting. Like if a ticket gets too much, they'll send it to the engineers. But I just think that's like a really good recommendation, because you're often exposed to like the cybersecurity problems at like a base level, and then often you can just ask the engineers like, what are they working on to like remediate the situation.
I was basically going to say the same thing. I just know that help desk is like the cybersecurity teams are often also very willing to cross-train help desk people if they have the time. So as long as you're in that door, you're much more likely to get promoted within that company to a cybersecurity position rather than finding somebody outside first. And I will also say, don't discount post-grad internships, because I was like, well, I graduated, I can't be an intern anymore, but I had a great experience as an intern if you can afford it, because I know they don't pay the best. But yeah, I loved my post-grad internship, and I would be nowhere without it. So
you could also look at maybe national labs. That could be another source, if you haven't thought of those. I'd also suggest some other similar domains, right? So software engineering is another domain. Anything where you can show development skills, use your coding, different applications there. AI is a big thing. A lot of people are building out AI programs. There's got to be a security component to that, so even if you find somebody who's doing AI, just kind of the what we were talking about earlier, just reach out to them and say, hey, have you thought about the security behind that? I'd love to get involved in that, and just use it to start a conversation with somebody, and you never know where it will take. But think about those other areas that might, they're not specifically focused on cyber, but show how cyber can relate to those. I think those are good ways to kind of promote yourself.
Yeah, just take anything and you'll find ways to tie software and cybersecurity into it. So, like it took me a year to find what I consider my first real job, but I had a temp job in the middle and I was just helping write math tests. And I basically just automated my whole job and I was able to talk about that experience.
Tutoring's a good job because if you can teach it and explain it to someone else, that helps you refine those communication skills. I've hired some people who have done tutoring and teaching assistant jobs. Those are, I'm trying to think of what experiences have been on resumes that I've seen.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you all so much. I know we have a bunch more questions, but again, I want to make sure to respect folks' time, so I'm gonna end it there. I do want to say that if you are an attendee and you are interested in following up with anyone that is here on the panel, everyone has agreed to share their contact information so you can reach out to them after. So I will be sending out a follow-up email to all of you with all of their contact information so that you can follow up if you'd like. But please join me in thanking our panelists. We got some wonderful insight today. I want to thank you all for especially joining us at probably the end of your workday. And so it's very, very appreciated. And so yeah, thank you for your time. And again, for attendees, I'll send a follow-up email. But I think this brings us to the end here. So thank you all.